What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and we had a glorious day of football yesterday. We had, of course, Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels, National Tight Ends Day. So, it's Monday. We're going to talk about all of it in my top 10 lessons learned in fantasy football takeaways video, where I look at everything that happened in Week 8, the data, the usage, the nuggets, the stats, save you all this time from looking through box scores and apply it moving forward to give you all of my observations from the weekend for fantasy football. As always, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like, and let's get straight into our first takeaway here, which is the world-famous rookie receiver report. As always, this is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you check them out. Use promo code RON. They'll match your first deposit up to $1,000. I have links in the description and the comment section down below. It's still October. They are doing huge boosts every day where they're giving you boost tokens in the Pick'em lobby. There is everything happening right now. I think it's the sports equinox where you have hockey on tonight, you have basketball on tonight, NFL, baseball, everything is going on. Check out what they have to offer on Underdog. Use my promo code, and it should be a fun night. Now, I will also say, speaking of other sports, you will see, I don't want to talk about, we're not going to talk about the Jets very much. You will see. Jets jersey is gone. I'm done. Look, I'm still a Jets fan. I always will be. But I'm done. I'm not supporting them in the background of my videos. All right? That privilege is now gone from the Jets until they earn that back from me. That is Chino Hill's LaMelo Ball. He had a good day the other day. Very funny post-game interview. One of my favorite players ever. I don't know what we're going to do. That'll be a football jersey eventually. It was just like the closest jersey to me as I pressed record. Now, rookie receiver report. All right? This is a little bit of a different look here. We're actually in the, I usually just take a screenshot of this, but we're actually just in it, the Google Sheets. So, how this works. You have route percentage from week 6, 7, and 8, and that's just on a per dropback basis. How often are you running a route? We want players that are running routes on a large percentage of their routes because then they are participating in passing plays. Now, I will say, I go over this every single time. Some people seem to be sick of it in the comments. Well, I don't want to alienate new viewers who come in here and are like, what the hell are you showing me? All right, so feel free to skip past this or tell me that I'm being an idiot for doing this every video, but I think it's worth it for the people that come in, see this video for the first time, and are like, what is going on here? Then you have targets per out run. That is just your targets divided by routes run. How much are you commanding volume on a per out basis? 20% or better is good. Yards per out run. How many yards you're getting on a per out basis in terms of efficiency? Anything over 2 is good. First downs per out run. That is just, are you moving the chains and being an engine in your offense? Anything over 10% is very good. And then PFF grade. How do you look on screen, on film to PFF's charters or whatever? Anything over 80 is very good. Anything over 70 is pretty solid. And then the change in PFF grade. So this just kind of shows how are you trending on a week-to-week basis in terms of is PFF grade going up or down week to week. Now, first up here, we're just going to go straight by PFF grade. This is players with over 90 routes run, sorted by PFF grade. And then I also added in Ricky Pearsall and Jermaine Burton, 2 interesting rookies who haven't hit that threshold just yet, but I make the rules, so I can sneak them in if I'd like to. Now, we have Brock Bowers. Nothing to really say with Bowers. I do understand that it wasn't an amazing game, and it got buried on this National Tight Ends Day, but 5 catches, 58 yards for him. If that's his floor, then sign me up, because tight ends are tough to come by despite, this massive week for them. So, again, 10.8 points is a down game for Bowers versus the Chiefs, who are a very good defense. I'm not worried at all. Then we have Brian Thomas. And this one is tough to swallow, I won't lie. He finally gets to 80-plus PFF grade, which is really fun, but he gets a chest/rib injury. Apparently, the MRI came back clean, so no cracks in the ribs, which is huge. First, the report was could he go on IR? Could he be out 2 to 4 weeks? Now it seems day-to-day. It seems like he probably misses a week or 2, which is better, but it sucks, right? With all the wide receiver injuries going on right now, just add this to the pile, which really sucks. But Brian Thomas Jr. finally going above 80 PFF grade. He hits every threshold that I talked about in the beginning, right? 20% plus targets per out run, 2+ yards per out run, 10% plus first downs per out run, 80 plus PFF grade. No doubter. Of course, he runs only 49% of the routes because he gets hurt, but he still gets home in terms of his usage. He gets enough yards and touchdowns to be a good player in your lineup. Then, of course, you have Malik Neighbors, who is playing on Monday Night Football, so we won't talk about him. Then I want to talk about the Carolina receivers. We have Jalen Coker first up here, and this is very, very exciting. This is a UDFA guy that we talked about back in our rookie dynasty stash video as a UDFA guy to stash on your dynasty rosters. He has been very, very fun. Where he comes out here and puts up an 80-plus PFF grade. And why we care about that threshold because of this. It's showed by Dwayne McFarland here. This is actually I want to say that at DF Bean Counter, he's like not even really around in the space anymore, but he was like the first one to really see this. If you hit an 80 plus rookie receiving grade in your first season, it is a huge, huge deal. You have Jefferson, McLaurin. This was like an older tweet as well. So like OBJ is up there. You have Michael Thomas, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Puka, Rashee Rice, Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, Tank Dell. Everybody who was really good as a rookie. A.J. Brown, Olave, Ayuk, Tyreek Hill, Doug Baldwin, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And you can see even the later round draft picks, right? Like a Doug Baldwin. Like the only other UDFA on this list is probably Doug Baldwin. I'm trying to think. I'm going to say yeah. So like if you're a UDFA popping on this list as a rookie, that is a massive, massive deal. Now, Jalen Coker is not going to wow you in terms of targets per out run. He's not going to wow you in terms of yards per out run. He's on a dysfunctional team, but what I think is very impressive, man, is on a team that doesn't move the chains a bunch in the Panthers, having a 10% plus first downs per out run is massive. He increased his PFF grade by the most this week in that change column by 9.2. That is very exciting. He had 6 targets, 4 catches, 78 yards, a touchdown. He was making big plays despite bad quarterback play. Amazing stuff. Now, am I starting him in redraft next week? Probably not, but he is somebody I'm stashing. Like in Dynasty, he now holds value. In redraft, I'm stashing him just in case, right? Because Deontay Johnson's going to get traded here most likely. And if we can see quarterback play for the Panthers rebound like it did with the Dalton, the first couple of weeks of Dalton, that could be interesting for Jalen Coker, but he's at least a guy, right? Being a UDFA and getting on the field like this, getting up to 70% plus of the routes this week, all really, really good and about as good as it gets for a UDFA. And then we'll also about Xavier Legette here. You know, he's on this offense, only 63% of the routes this week. I'm not sure why that was. I didn't see that he got hurt in the injury report. I could be wrong there, so that's a little bit scary, but everything else is like pretty much pedestrian. He increases his PFF grade this week. He scores a touchdown, his 3rd touchdown in 5 games. He's kind of only living off of touchdowns, not really any per route efficiency, but in a bad offense, I'll give him a break. And to me, he's at least avoided the John Mingo, face planner, complete zero. He's at least a guy, right? Like 18% targets per run, that'll play. If you can't find efficiency in this offense, fine, but he's getting in the end zone. He's looking like a good player. So we shall 100% take that. Then we have Marvin Harrison Jr., who comes out here, changes his PFF grade by 3.2, which is absolutely massive. He's within a hair of an 80-plus PFF grade here. And the huge thing is, of course, he scores a touchdown, 6 catches, 111 yards. Huge, huge day for Marvin Harrison Jr., but we got the usage we've been asking for. He's been using like this sacrificial X role that Matt Harmon actually coined, and they actually used him across the field, right? He's not just like running clear outs and streaks and stuff. He's running these crossers. He's running these, hitches out of the slot, as Josh Norris highlighted in the first reply. So that's all massive. Like, we've been begging for this. I actually showed last week, I think, was like the miles per hour, or no. I want to say it's like after a certain amount of seconds, the downfield depth that he's going to get on average for a route. And he was in like this Alec Pierce, rookie year George Pickens, just like 12 yards down the field, 3 seconds after the ball is snapped. And that's not good, right? That's just somebody that's kind of a decoy. He was used as a true featured receiver here, and they came back and beat the Dolphins. And I think that is going to make this usage stick. So Marvin Harrison Jr., massive green arrows up for him. Then we'll talk about Ladd McConkey as well. Now, PFF really dinged him for whatever reason. I think he had a fumble in week 7, right? So he plays a Monday Night Football. He's not in the last rookie receiver report. He fumbles here, has his worst PFF grade of the year, and then he comes out yesterday in week 8 and gets his best PFF grade of the year, kind of canceling out and putting him at 76.7. I do think that he'll be back up above 80 soon here. He hits all the thresholds we're looking for. He goes out there, gives you 6 for 111 and 2. Just an absolute monster day. Ladd McConkey, we've been talking about, like, your top-end guys. He's like the next tier, right? It's like Neighbors, Marv, Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas Jr. and Marv are interchangeable. And then that next receiver after that is Ladd McConkey. He's been that good on a per-route basis, PFF grade, all of that. He's been a stud. And the biggest thing for him is that the Chargers are actually passing the ball now. In the first 4 weeks, they were 31st neutral pass rate. So that's just, early downs, non-garbage time. And then after the bye, they are first. Huge. And they're 2-0 with that new kind of mentality, or maybe I think they're 2-1 with that new mentality. My bad, but still absolutely massive that we're seeing them like let Herbert throw the ball, run this offense. This would be a team that you would love to see them get a receiver at the deadline just to add in there, just because like they're making throws like Jalen Reagor on this Chargers team. But give me somebody next to Ladd McConkey who's an NFL receiver, and we could really cook. Maybe the Jets are sellers now with Mike Williams. Then after Ladd McConkey, we have Keon Coleman, man. Keon Coleman was like trending he was literally on, like, him and Worthy would be like guys I talk about every week next to each other, right? But he's now moved up to a 70 plus PFF grade. He's had 2 back-to-back weeks now that have been very good. He had 16.5 PPR points last week, 18 this week, his 2 best games all year. He's hard trending up right now, right? 2+ yards per out run, 70+ PFF receiving grade. He looks good. He's making plays. Now, of course, the thing is here is Amari Cooper still didn't run very many routes in this game. So the question is just going to become, once Amari Cooper is running a lot of routes, how is that going to affect things moving forward? But for now, I think especially just across the board, because if you have him in redraft, you just want him to be good enough to make an impact down the stretch. And in Dynasty, I think he's flashed enough to not be a complete zero in year one, and he's attached to Josh Allen long term. Now, after that, actually I wanted to check real quick how many routes Amari Cooper ran. Yeah, Amari Cooper he ran 24 routes. You know what? That's not bad at all. He ran 24 routes to Keon Coleman's 28. So Keon Coleman actually kind of just alphaed Amari Cooper. So that's actually massive. Amari Cooper is very close to getting fully ramped up. And the fact that this is just a side takeaway because I don't have an Amari Cooper section here, but 24 routes run out of 38 dropbacks. I guess you can say, it was a game that they had in their hand. It was never really all that close. So whatever. But 2 targets for Amari Cooper feels thin. I would imagine, 7 for Coleman, 9 for Shakir, 7 for Kincaid. I'd assume a lot of those get chopped up by like 2 targets as they work Amari Cooper into the game plan. Then we have Rome Odunze. Odunze, not a great day for him, right? Like, he didn't really pop off, but nobody in that Chicago Bears offense played all that well. They all kind of struggled until the fourth quarter. Anything that was good on offense came through DeAndre Swift or Roschon Johnson. And I'm just trying to check here. Like, Odunze, he led the wide receiver room in targets, or he tied with Keenan Allen, I believe. He brings in 6 targets, 3 catches, 41 yards, but that's not terrible, right? That's tied for his second most targets in a game. He did get used a ton. He got some like schemed open looks as well. And next week he gets Arizona, which should be a much more like favorable secondary for him to go up against. And he also, you could see, he increases PFF grade by 3+, right? Or just 3. So that's good, right? He's trending up. He's not a complete zero yet, but man, this Bears team we're going to talk about in a little bit, it's a little tough with how good their defense is and how bad Shane Waldron is to really expect many fireworks from this offense, outside of, those like beat-up games they had against the Jaguars earlier. Then you have Ricky Pearsall here. He, of course, coming back from the gunshot wound, he gets 4 catches, 38 yards. He increases his PFF grade by 4.1. That's huge. He has a carry for 39 yards, which I love. Love to see a fun, dynamic player. He's a good player. We kind of have to see more. Like, he's not somebody you're going to trust in your lineup anytime soon. The peripherals are fine, right? 16.4% targets per out run. You want to see this be better, him be more efficient, him getting more first downs. But for now, he's trending up, and I still am going to give him a lot of grace coming back from the injury that he's coming back from. Then you have Xavier Worthy. This is spooky hours for Xavier Worthy, man. He now has, it's tough because he's getting the volume. You just want more efficiency. He gets 8 targets in back-to-back weeks. He had 19 yards on 8 targets last week, just 37 yards on 8 targets this week. Brutal efficiency. He did score a touchdown, so he kind of gets home free if you flexed him. But man, can we look good? Can we make a big play? I get that Mahomes overthrew him last week, but it's getting frustrating. And, DeAndre Hopkins only ran, I'm trying to see here, he only ran 14 routes with 3 targets. That's only going to get worse for Xavier Worthy. So I don't know. I don't know how this works out. The explosive stuff that we thought we were getting early in the season has not been there. He's finally getting the volume. He's just not making good on the volume. But I guess if you want to tell yourself every wide receiver's hurt right now, and he's giving you 10+ PPR points in 3 of his last 4, and he's had every week since, so week 5 he sets a career high in targets with 6. Sets a career high with targets with 8 in week 7, and then ties his career high with 8 in week 8. So they're trying to get him the ball. I'm just begging him to look like he deserves these touches because they're not going to go his way if he can't make good on them. I guess he scored a touchdown. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but I need more. I need more out of the 4.2 speed, all-time speed freak guy to give me something better than a 1.19 yards per out run. I don't think that's that crazy to ask for. Then we have Jalen McMillan. He comes out here. I guess these per route numbers are kind of improving. He gets a 0.7 upgrade in PFF grade, which isn't great. He's a tough one, man. I will say he's had 15 targets in the last 2 weeks. It's just similar to Worthy. He's getting the volume, just not really producing with the volume, which is bad because rookie receivers are usually the opposite. They're usually being very efficient, and then they get the volume later. Like that's what we saw with Rashee Rice last year. It's kind of the opposite here, where we're seeing the volume without the efficiency, which is scary. Again, 15 targets over the last 2 weeks for McMillan, only 7 targets in weeks 1 through 6. So he's getting the volume. He's being a featured receiver. The efficiency is just brutal with just 50 total yards on those 15 targets last 2 weeks. I will say, if you want a positive, he set a season high in slot snaps with 15 slot snaps in this game. So he's being featured more as a slot receiver, which we want, but it hasn't really paid off there. Then we have Jermaine Burton, who I added to this list just because I wanted to. He was a guy that I really liked coming out of school. He kind of reminded me of like an Antonio Callaway type of guy where he has a bunch of talent, and you could say Josh Gordon, Martavis Bryant, all of these guys where tons of talent, but some kind of like off the field issues. There was some sort of story on a broadcast. He was falling asleep in meetings. Who knows if that's actually true? And I don't really want to peddle that narrative. But 2.75 yards per run. When he's on the field, he's making a huge catch downfield, which is huge. He's not commanding a ton of targets, but the reason that he was in this game so involved after 2 straight 0% route shares is because T. Higgins misses time. So when T. Higgins goes down, Jermaine Burton is making plays, which is huge because he's almost forcing their hand. He's pretty much it's a crazy situation where he's a very good player and he's like daring the Bengals. Have Charlie Jones run those routes, have Trent Irwin run those routes, see how it goes. Even though, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it's good to see every time he's on the field, he's making plays, which is huge. He's not dropping things. He's getting like 20 plus yards down the field and catching the ball. He's at 68.2 PFF grade, 2.75 yards per out run. But again, he's living on big plays. That's why his targets per out run and first downs per out run are low, but he's also living on low volume. So that's just kind of how that's going to work regardless. I'm bullish on him long term. You probably need a T. Higgins like long-term injury for him to ever be startable in redraft, but he's someone 100%. I have some optimism for in terms of dynasty. And I will say as well, Eric All probably done for redraft purposes. Yeah, I'm dropping him in redraft. Like, he was exciting at first, right? Like, targets per out run was huge. His yards per out run was way better than this at first. Everything has just regressed. And in a game that T. Higgins doesn't play and Gesicki gets his route share juiced and his volume juiced, Eric All stays the same. So he's someone in redraft that can be dropped. I know maybe some of you had like tight end premium leagues. I know I had him in some FFPC leagues. If you have him in a 2 tight end league, he can go. Still a fine stash in dynasty. Then we have Troy Franklin. Brutal week for Troy Franklin. Decreases his PFF grade by the most on the week, minus 3.8. Still commanding targets, 21.8% targets per out run, but his route share got pulled. He had a really bad drop. It's just tough. If Troy Franklin's going to drop stuff downfield, then he's not going to be an NFL player. And then just some notes. Anyone else I didn't mention, like, probably doesn't really need to be mentioned. The only guy I have a thing to talk about for is Bub Means. Bub Means, with Olave back 18% of the routes, he's toast. But that also tells us that Mason Tipton, who is the worst like per route and PFF receiver, is still just fine next to Olave. Like, he's ahead on the depth chart. Ahead of Bub Means is what I'm trying to say there. And then A.D. Mitchell still doing his thing where he's, leading all rookie receivers in targets per out run. Can't find efficiency anywhere. Minus 0.8 PFF grade. All good there. A.D. Mitchell. Now, moving on from this, let's talk about the rookie quarterbacks, right? Everyone wants to hear my thoughts, right? We have Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels. That's probably the thing that's most in front of everybody's minds right now, is just talking about Caleb, talking about Jaden Daniels, and wanting concrete takeaways. Now, how I see it is there's not anything that's concrete in terms of takeaways outside of Jaden Daniels just being an absolute stud, right? Now you can say, EPA per play might be flawed, CPOE might be flawed, but it's a decent gauge of how quarterbacks are playing this year. Completion percentage over expectation, just based on your ADOT, how much are you completing passes over under expectation, and then EPA per play, just on a per play basis, are you moving the chains, are you extending drives, are you scoring more points than you are expected to based on where your drive began, and then every play thereafter that. So it's kind of like yards and points, but given context, right? Where 2 yards to get a first down versus 2 yards in general, big difference. Where it's like, who cares about 2 yard carry? But if that 2 yards is to get into the end zone or to get a first down, that's huge, and that's going to factor into EPA per play. And here, Jaden Daniels is far and away with the elites of the world, right? He's right there with Josh Allen, Lamar, Burrow, all guys who are in the MVP hunt right now. Now, the thing that I am taking a lot of comfort in is what I would say is Caleb Nix and Drake May are all in this mix of, quarterbacks where none of them are Bryce Young level bad. And I say that not in like a mocking manner, but as a Jets fan, I've seen, Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold, like Bryce Young on the bottom of the screen, like Spencer Rattler. These guys come in and they simply can't play. The beautiful part about this draft class so far is everyone that has came in and gotten snaps, they can at least hang with the middle of the pack. And that's a massive, massive W because these quarterbacks can improve year over year, as we've seen with guys like Josh Allen and you see with guys like Lamar Jackson. And that's not to say that every quarterback is going to improve like this, but as long as they can just play and they can just clear that first hurdle of, okay, you're not this like massive liability, that's massive. So in terms of like real life quarterbacking, I would have Daniels and then I would have a tier break to Drake May and Caleb and then a tier break to Bo Nix. But Bo Nix is like no consolation prize. Like he is not in that Bryce Young, Zach Wilson bucket of like guys who can't play. He's actually showing some promise. I would put him more like the Mitch Trubisky, Blake Bortles bucket of guys, but that's still very exciting. With some upside there. And let's talk about real quick. Bo Nix, he plays Carolina. He puts up 3 touchdowns. He had a really good game. He was like maybe the quarterback 1 on the week. He was super high up there. I will say, it's versus Carolina. I know Carolina's a bad team, but it's good that a player like Bo Nix is just dunking on the layups, right? Like that's a good thing. If you can put up 3 touchdowns and put up what you're supposed to put up versus a bad defense, that's huge because sometimes you go out there and you fall flat versus a bad defense, and that's just the sign of kind of like mediocre football, mediocre play in general. So Bo Nix is showing some life. And now I will say Caleb had a bad day, but this Commanders defense, of course, the coach is Dan Quinn, who had some really, really good defenses in his past with Atlanta and Dallas. The first 3 weeks, they were brutal. 32nd in EPA per play allowed. Now they're 4th, weeks 4 through 8. They've actually really turned it up on defense. There's somebody where I would say a small takeaway here on top of the rookie quarterbacks is that when you see Washington on the schedule for a fantasy matchup, it used to be, probably like weeks 1 through 3 and then like 4, 5, 6, and then maybe even 7 of like, wow, this team plays against Washington. That's a huge, huge layup for them in fantasy. That is no longer. This is actually a very, very, very good defensive unit. I don't know how they figured it out with, like Emmanuel Forbes and some of the worst corners in football on that team, but they have absolutely figured out in terms of like the pressure and getting things correct. So they are no layup here. And I say that to say like Caleb Williams had a bad day. And I wouldn't be like, oh, well, he couldn't, Bo Nix just beat up on the Panthers. Why couldn't Caleb do it on the Commanders? Because the Commanders are actually a good defense. I will say I was excited to see it was the most rushing we've seen from Caleb Williams. He had 10 carries for 41 yards. That's great. And just in terms of like Konami code upside long term, he did have 10 for 24 completions, 131 passing yards. He had 1 fumble, and it was a lost fumble. So not great, right? Probably like one of his worst games to date. But I also don't blame a ton of it on him. He looked really good in the 4th quarter. Shane Waldron had some of the most brutal play calls ever. And like we said with Roman Dunze, he gets Arizona coming up here, which I think a bounce back can happen. But I will say he was someone that was like flirting with like top 12 quarterback rest of season. He now gets downgraded back to like your, hopefuls of like Drake May at like QB, 15, 16, 17, 18 of like, guys that I'd probably prefer, your Goffs, Baker, Purdy, Geno, not all that sexy type of guys, but in that next tier of like hopeful upside. And you can see here as well, this is from shout out to ADP Chasing, man. I watch them before I record every single one of these just in the background. Make sure you check out ADP Chasing, check out Ship Chasing channel. But they had a fun conversation talking about the rookie quarterbacks. I just wanted to steal this graphic of fantasy points per game, pretty much like removing like the bad weeks for, like Drake May if he got hurt like he did in this Jets game, Jayden Daniels when he got hurt versus the Panthers last week. Jayden Daniels is the QB3 in points per game currently. So I would call him, he's up there. Let me give myself some opacity here so you guys can see me. But I would put, what's going on here? But I would put, Jayden Daniels to me, it's like Lamar and then it's Daniels, Allen, Hurts, like all in the same tier. So Jayden Daniels, massive, massive crush for redraft. Bo Nix is like actually kind of now a guy that you can stream if you'd like to versus good matchups. Probably same thing with Caleb and same thing with Drake May. But again, it's nice to see, right? We have the QB4 in May. I think it's a little bit inflated versus, easy opponents, and we'll see what that looks like moving forward with his injury. But all of them being like this top 20 quarterback range for points per game isn't bad at all. I do think Caleb can improve on that number as we get going here. So it's just to say that be thankful that none of these guys are like stone dead in the water, and that they all have shown, potential, and they've all shown high fantasy scoring upside in close matchups. I know that there wasn't anything like definitive of like, I know a lot of people like want to like come to these videos and watch me dance on someone's grave, like I'm not going to say like Caleb Williams is done. Like I genuinely think that he's going to be a very, very good quarterback in this league. He showed some things in the fourth quarter, and I think that especially against defenses not as good as Washington, and maybe on a day where Washington's offense could have operated, maybe it was like the Jaden Daniels injury early on, but if Washington could have put up 30 points on that defense, I know it's a tall task, so the Bears defense is good, but I'm just saying it was a bad environment versus a good defense, so it is what it is. Now, after that, let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins' debut. This is a chart from PFF where you can see the snap counts. Hopkins comes out here, 14 routes run, 3 targets. He gives you 2 for 29 receiving, and he was the only wide receiver on the team to hit 2+ yards per out run. So that's big. It just comes down to how long it takes with this pretty in-depth Chiefs playbook, how long it's going to take for him to be, he goes from 14 routes run to 32. And how many of those routes get pulled from Justin Watson versus Xavier Worthy? We'd hope most of them get pulled from Justin Watson, but we shall see. And I wouldn't trust him in the lineup until he gets to that 70% plus of the route. So that's something we will be monitoring closely rest of season. And then on the other side in that game, people are going to want to hear about the Calvin Ridley stuff. Of course, late round QB, shout out JJ Zach Reason. I go on his show this week. I put it up on my channel, and I say, well, Calvin Ridley, I think he's a little overrated. Then he comes out here, gives you 39.5% target share. He, puts up 24.7 PPR points. He looks amazing. But I will say, it was a game where they were just out of it from the first quarter. And the Detroit Lions pass defense isn't all that great. They are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers right now. So they are actually this pass funnel where their run defense is really good, opens things up for the passing game. And the Titans, of course, they made good on that, but he's had games where he had these high target totals. He had 9 targets the previous week for just 42 yards, 8 targets before that for 0 yards. Now he gets 15 targets to give you 143 yards, and I believe a touchdown as well. So, or no, did he score a touchdown yesterday, Calvin Ridley? He fumbled. All right, he fumbled and scored no touchdowns. He just gave you 10 catches for 143 yards. But, yeah, so, I mean, it's good. It's great. I would be skeptical. I'd be maybe looking to sell. The other part of this passage as well is that he has also had more than 8 PPR points just twice this year. And then Dwayne McFarland comes in saying he had a monster 40% target share. Still hard to be very excited moving forward with the quarterback challenges in Tennessee. Would be at least trying to sell this week, put him in a 2-for-1. And I agree with that. I'd be looking to sell I personally. They can give him, like we saw in week 6, they gave him 8 targets and he gave you 0 points. So the Lions defense is pretty easy. He gets New England, the Chargers, Minnesota, Houston, Washington. So, I mean, outside of New England, it's a pretty tough secondary list he has coming up here. Let's talk about National Tight Ends Day. What a fun day, man. I hope some people are tired about it on social media. I think it was pretty fun. All the tight ends got home. You can see from Rich Rebar here. Week 8, it's every single week here. You can see in week 8, it was the most receiving yards by tight ends as a position, and it was the most receiving touchdowns by the position this year. And if we look at the top scores at the flex spots this week in half PPR, you of course have 4 tight ends in there, which feels like a lot, right? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 4 out of the 15 being tight ends feels like a lot in terms of 20-plus scores. You have Kittle, Kelsey, 2 guys that's expected. You have Cade Otton, which is we'll talk about in a little bit. And then, of course, you have Kyle Pitts. Now, people are running to crown Kyle Pitts. I understand the want and the desire to crown him. I'm close to wanting to crown him. But I just wish it was a little bit more sustainable, where this game, he had only 60% of the routes. Now, of course, maybe he got banged up. Maybe, this was a game where the Falcons led early and they just wanted to run the ball, so they bring in Charlie Werner to take a lot of those routes and snaps. So that's not great. And he only had 5 targets. That was less than, I believe, I want to say that was less than Bijan, Mooney, and London. I could be off there. Let me double check that. But it wasn't, I'm still waiting for the day where he leads the team in targets and has a monster day as well. I know that he kind of did that last week too, but I guess it just sort of speaks to him getting involved more. I will say 5 targets on just 19 routes run here. Right, he had 19 routes run to London's 30, Mooney's 30, and McLeod's 30. So that's a little bit tough to stomach, but 5 targets on those routes is a pretty clean 25% targets per out run. Can I not do math? 5 divided by 20? Yeah, 25%. So it's not terrible. It just sucks to see him only have 30 snaps in a 62-snap game for the offense. But you can see here with this Ryan Heath tweet, weeks 1 through 4, pretty brutal stuff. Weeks 5 through 8, tight end 1 in receiving yards per game, tight end 2 in fantasy points per game. So he now probably upgrades to a guy that's like this fringe top 8 tight end that you can start every week and have some kind of confidence in after a really, really low 4-week stretch. I'm only pouring a little bit of cold water because it's like he had an amazing game, but he had less targets than London, Mooney, and Bijan, and he ran 19 routes, which is actually less routes than Bijan ran as the running back. So something to monitor in terms of why he ran so little routes. Again, it could have just been a game script thing, and Charlie Warner, who had 35 snaps to Pitt's 30 snaps, is just a better run blocker, which I can buy into, but you don't love to hear that. After that, you have Cade Otton. He came out here, and we actually talked about him in our waiver wire show, is like without Godwin and Mike Evans, he is very in the mix to be a difference maker. He goes over 20% of the targets in each of his last 2 games, something he only did in week 3 before that. And this is because, the Godwin injury, the Mike Evans injury, and this is, of course, from the utilization report over at Fantasy Life. That's pretty good, man. He's the tight end 1 overall the last 2 weeks, Cade Otton. He is somebody where if you grabbed him off of waivers and you don't have one of these, Bowers, Kelsey, Kittle, you can fire up Cade Otton and feel really, really good about it. The Buccaneers offense has just been that good. Now, I will be honest, this is a bit of a 2-for-1. I'm squeezing in some stuff that I couldn't get as my lessons learned. And I will say part of the reason why I take so long to get these out sometimes, I just want to make sure that I cover everything that could possibly get covered that you guys might possibly want to hear about. I'm not ducking any smoke on any player. I don't want to miss anything blatant as well. So I actually always talk about in the Discord that's on the Patreon. I ask them, like, what should I talk about? Just to make sure I'm covering all my bases here. Now, I just wanted to bring up the Jags wide receiver room. This seems to be a huge point of interest. Right, we had the Mike Clay saying reportedly out 2 to 4 weeks, but we just saw with the rookie receiver report a more recent thing said day-to-day. So that's huge. But Christian Kirk out for season. Gabe Davis out with a shoulder injury. Parker Washington next up on the depth chart with Tim Jones. Parker Washington's actually a fun prospect out of Penn State. He's made some plays on punt returns and stuff. He's fun for like dynasty and really deep leagues. Everything else, I don't really know what else there's to say about the Jaguars. Like, they're all just hurt, But that's going to give a massive upgrade to Evan Ingram, as you can see with these splits here, is that in his 5 career games over the last 3 years that he's been on the Jaguars, I don't know why I can't talk today, he has averaged 18.94 points per game. I have to believe that would be like easily the tight end 1 this year. And I'm not saying I expect him to be a 19-point per game guy at tight end over the rest of the year, but what I am saying, that would be even more than Kittle. What I am saying is that it's a huge upgrade to a guy who is already tight end 11 in points per game here through his 4 games played. So Evan Ingram, massive boost. He did have 4 catches, 36 yards, and a touchdown on tight end day. His touchdown was amazing, and all these receiver injuries just help Evan Ingram that much more. And then same thing here. People want me to talk about the Green Bay Packers receiver room, and you get Tucker Kraft out here. He gives you another long broken play. He gives you 3 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown, which is huge. And then people want me to talk about the Green Bay Packers receiver room. And this is just, again, I get it wasn't the best day for Jayden Reed, and I get we're getting very frustrated with Jayden Reed, but you have to remember as well, Jordan Love left this game pretty much at halftime. So, I just have a tough time holding this against Jayden Reed, and I 100% get with Jayden Reed that you look here with Ryan Heath, target share leaders with Love, right? Watson at 27%, then Dobbs, then Tucker Kraft, then Jayden Reed at 9.1%. It's like, man, why aren't we getting this guy the ball more? But you can see he got a carry. He had 3 targets. They're going to get him involved. I've already sort of spoke on this. Even as a numbers guy, I understand the volume is never going to be there for Jayden Reed. I just believe in him as a talent and what his connection is with Jordan Love. So he had a quiet first half. Who knows in the second half if Jordan Love finds him on a 40-yard bomb like that he did against the Rams, and that completely flips his day. So I just have a hard time I'm not going to come out here in a year where wide receiver is so weak and so fragile and say downgrade Jayden Reed, keep him out of your lineups, because if I still took his points per game with Jordan Love, it would be top 10 to 20 numbers on the season in a year where you need that at wide receiver. So I'm not giving up on Jayden Reed. I'm not souring on Jayden Reed. Again, I think he's probably a buy this week, Jayden Reed. And I will say, don't buy into the Christian Watson stuff. As much as I love Christian Watson, they just rotate these guys so much. Watson led in routes here, and then another week Dontavion Wicks will, and there is no continuity. So until Watson strings together a few of these games and actually can prove to us that he is the wide receiver preferred over Wicks, he said a season high in snap share, 74%, but he had just 4 catches for 39 yards. So they have Detroit this next week, who is really light against the pass, as we saw with the Titans, and then they have a bye week. So who knows if they bring in Malik Willis, play one game, then go to bye so that Jordan Love can stay healthy. But it's a divisional game that matters a lot. So we'll see how this kind of shakes out in terms of Love and this receiver formation or rotation. But I'm not giving up on Jayden Reed. I'm not throwing in the towel, even though, again, I think some people kind of want me to come on here and be like, it's over. Dump your bag, sell it all. Like, no, good player. The volume's not always going to be there, but you live with the lows and the highs when it comes to Jayden Reed. Then we have Gesicki here. Last guy we'll talk about second to last guy we'll talk about for tight end day. Ryan Heath comes out here. Really, really good stat where Mike Gesicki benefited from T. Higgins' absence, commanding a 21.6% target share, leading the team with 73 receiving yards. Gesicki without Higgins this year, 20% target share, 60 receiving yards per game, 11.4 fantasy points per game. With T. Higgins, all brutal. So Gesicki gets an upgrade. That's just something to stash in the back of your head. Gesicki gets an upgrade in all games that T. Higgins misses moving forward. Honestly, more so Gesicki than Yoshivas, which I think fools a lot of people in terms of like, oh, fire up Yoshivas. We already know the reason we like zero RB and stuff is because the wide receiver handcuff doesn't really work like that. Unless if your name's Cedric Tillman. Cedric Tillman's a monster we'll talk about later. Then we have Mark Andrews. His usage rebounds. I found it interesting. It's like game script dependent here. Any game that they had to sweat and throw the ball late, you see Mark Andrews getting his route percentage up. You know, like that 60% one in week 6. I want to say it was a close game as well. But in wins, 5 games, they're of course 5-3. In those 5 wins, 49.4% of the routes. We want that number to be 70% plus to feel confident starting a tight end. In losses, 74%. Now, of course, the Ravens aren't going to be underdogs in many games moving forward, but it's something to mention where it just seems like Mark Andrews isn't called upon until he's needed to. But what I will say about Mark Andrews is I'm open to the idea that he was hurt early on, and the game script stuff is just a coincidence with Andrews. And if it's a coincidence, then we could see much better days ahead, as he has now put up 15.6, 20.1, and 14.6 in his last 3 games. So we'll see how this sticks moving forward. Again, the game script stuff scares me, but maybe I am looking too deep into it, and it's more of a he's getting healthier and getting used more kind of thing. Because you can see the target shares didn't always come with the routes. You would like for them to line up like they did this week. You know, if you could get the 15% plus target share and 70% plus routes share moving forward, he would be like a fringe top 8 guy. But you could there's tight ends like kind of getting deep, which I saw some chart. I think it was actually Andrew Cooper, who I shout out all the time, of like the tight ends suck and then the receivers get hurt and then the tight ends look good, right? It's like Jameson Williams going down, boost Laporta. With Mark Andrews, I guess he didn't really have a receiver injury. I'm trying to think of some of these other ones, right? Evan Ingram, we just talked about all the receivers who got hurt there. The Raiders with Bowers, it wasn't an injury, but Devontae Adams getting bumped out. I guess with Jacoby Myers as well. But a lot of these tight ends are kind of, you know, thriving off of the injuries. Kelsey, right? If Rashee Rice was still healthy, he would be looking much worse than he does now. Kittle with Ayuk going down, and then Debo also his pneumonia stuff that kind of kept him quiet last night. So something to definitely think about, where wide receiver injury, you know, if you want to think about it in the way of like running back handcuffs with running back injury, maybe it's like the tight end, because the bar is so much lower to hurdle. I don't know. That's just something that I thought about as I was talking here. Our 5th takeaway is the new look Browns, man. Shout out Jameis Winston. This is just a slew of stats from JJ Zachariason. Again, shout out him. We had him, or no, I went on his show. I then, you know, copy and pasted it to this channel. But he does these data dumps every single Sunday or like Monday morning, and he gives you a bunch of stats from the day. Jameis Winston had 334 passing yards on Sunday. Deshaun Watson hadn't gone above 200 passing yards all season. The last time he threw for 300 yards was in January of 2021. Cedric Tillman has seen target shares of 25% and 22% over his last 2 games without Amari Cooper and has scored 47 PPR points. Cooper has scored 43.6 PPR points across his last 5 games. Nick Chubb, and we'll talk about Nick Chubb in a second here, right? Nick Chubb saw his running back share rise from 69% to 76% week over week. Target share fell, but his route participation went up. So he's starting to slowly get worked back in as well. I'd say trending arrow up on Chubb just with the environment. You know, we're scoring more points, we're moving the ball, we're giving him more touches. And then these wide receivers, man, pretty crazy that we had, you know, Judy, Elijah Moore, and Tillman, and Njoku all got home if you started them. I'm not saying that 300 plus yards is the expectation moving forward, but this is just a much healthier passing offense. And Cedric Tillman is a real guy. I will say apologies from me. On the waiver wire show, I completely overlooked him. Then you guys got on me in the comments about it. Then FFPC waivers happened on Wednesday, and my buddy Jacob Sanderson was really hyping up Cedric Tillman. I looked into it. I have him now in a couple of these high stakes leagues, and then I also brought him up again in the Discord with the Patreon. saying, hey, if you're in a deep league, check him out. And then also I brought him up on JJ Zacharyason's show that we posted here on Saturday. So Cedric Tillman, I've been fully Cedric Tillman pilled. He looks like a real X wide receiver, winning against, one-on-one coverage, 9 targets, 7 catches, 99 yards, 2 touchdowns. Monstrous game. I don't know what his ceiling is moving forward, but he's now, again, in a very weak wide receiver crop right now. He is someone you can definitely think about starting on a weekly basis. I will say the jury's still out on, we'll see what happens with Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy. I feel much less confident in them. I don't know if every single week they can get there, 12 targets for Elijah Moore. And Jerry Jeudy, 5 for 79 is cool, but nothing crazy. But then again, we talk about tight ends here, and Njoku gets a massive, massive upgrade. 561 and a touchdown in a week where he is the 4th leading receiver. So he's a red zone threat. He's going to get more volume than he even did yesterday. Arrows up on David Njoku. Then we'll talk about the new look Miami Dolphins here. This was a big one people wanted me to talk about, right? Tua comes back from concussion. And Devon Achane, look, man, we've gotten things wrong. The wide receivers are completely decimated. It's been one of those years where we preached wide receivers through the flex, and we're just getting wide receivers. We have Stephon Diggs' knee injury. Brian Thomas Jr. is banged up. Just everything that could go wrong is going wrong right now. So Devon Achane showing us what he could have been all season with Tua is huge, and then also huge for his rest of season projections. You can see here from David J. Gattiari, 26.4 points per game in games with Tua. He would be the RB1 in points per game. Some more good tweets here. One from Akash. 17 game pace for Achane. 113 catches, 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, 17 points per game on receiving alone. So his role in the receiving game right now is massive, as JJ touches on here. 21.1% target share on Sunday. In completed games this year, he hasn't dipped below a 13%, and he's now scored again 23, 29.5, 26.7 in 3 games with Tua. So Achane is just on an absolute rocket ship. Now, the rest of the offense with Tua, right, wasn't all that crazy for the other guys, but the big thing here is that this offense looked good. They played against the Cardinals in a fun shootout, but they're in that upper right of success rate and EPA per play. They had good offenses this week. We are zoning in on the Dolphins, which is just huge, right? We saw first week back with Tua, people were really souring on what is this team going to look like with Tua? Is it going to fix these issues? It kind of did, right? This is a bad defense that they played against, but the offense looked good. They scored points. Of course, you want more from Tyreek and Waddle, but I think that is coming, right? 9 targets for Tyreek, 6 for Waddle. I just think it's a matter of time until one of those guys pops off and we start to see this offense really click with Tua. Then we have the Anthony Richardson experience. I know that is a big, big topic on Twitter. You will never see me not cheer on Anthony Richardson. I still believe in him long term. I know that people are pretty out on him in terms of completion percentage, him taking a play off. But in terms of fantasy here, Fantasy Kosh kind of breaks it down here. Per Next Gen Stats, there have been 3 games in which a quarterback has been pressured on 60% of dropbacks. Week 7 for Richardson, Week 8 for Richardson. Now, he's always been great avoiding pressure, so I'm not going to credit him with inviting the pressure. That's his calling card. So O-line's been failing him the last 2 weeks. He also had the 3rd highest percentage of his passes dropped this week as well. But I think what we all have to understand here is that for even as much as we want in fantasy Flacco to start games moving forward, this is a team where their jobs, Ballard, Steichen, etc., all hinges on the success of Richardson. So they're going to ride him until the wheels fall off here. So I would just say all the hopium of Flacco, he's got to come in, he's got to start. I would just kind of throw it out the window. You just have to kind of accept the reality that Richardson's going to start the rest of the season. And if that's the case, the only guy that I want to start is Downs. I just think that Downs' talent is undeniable at this point. I'm done. He had a quiet week last week. I think you just have to accept he's a boom-bust flex play with massive, massive boom weeks. He gets 9 targets. He actually leads a touchdown, on the half-inch line. Beautiful throw and catch from Richardson to Downs at the end of the game. Could have been a 4 for 109 and 2 touchdown type of game. He is a monster. He makes do with what Richardson gives him. And I think that Steichen has just completely understood that Downs is their best receiving threat. And so moving forward, again, rest of season, dynasty, weekly, Downs will be ahead of Pittman for me moving forward. And somebody that I have, not confidence, but again, in a weak wide receiver landscape, somebody that you can certainly put in the flex spot and hope for a boom week. And then also I will say, just touching on the Colts here, JT, 20 for 105 and a touchdown, and then also a catch. Sign me up there. Our 8th takeaway, Chris Olave back in the mix. I will say I was very sad for a second. I think something that's very underreported right now. and I want to make sure I say this the right way. Because Tua's concussions have happened on primetime, it's viewed in a very certain light. Olave has almost a worse concussion history the last 2 years in the NFL, or even like last 3 years in the NFL. It's about as bad as Tua. It was very sad to see. So he comes back from concussion in this game. He gets hit a certain way where Twitter doctors were saying like this might be another concussion, and then that would be like, that would have been like 2 in a 3-week span, and then like maybe like 3 or 4 over a 2-year span, which is really scary. So I'm glad that it seemed like he didn't have a concussion. He came out of this alive. But he gives you 14 targets in this game. Again, in a game where he sort of came out for a little bit. But this is just huge to note that with Rashid Shaheed gone, he is getting peppered, right? 14 targets, 8 catches, 107 yards. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. He's getting home. And then we can also talk about, keep an eye on Kendre Miller, man. Keep an eye on Kendre Miller. He was a very, very fun prospect out of TCU. People remember from the Devy days that Zach Evans was literally up there with like Bijan in that class, and Gibbs is like a really good player. Goes to Ole Miss, splits time with Judkins, and then I might have the order of operations wrong. I can't remember if he went to Ole Miss or TCU wrong, but he had a season with Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller completely outshines him. He's like this explosive between the tackles runner. He gives you, it's a small sample, but 4 missed tackles on just 6 attempts here. 13th of 111 running backs in yards at the contact per attempt. 2nd in elusiveness rating. He deserves more touches, and he does. I just think that it's tough with Dennis Allen right now, but I think as, Kamara had like a broken hand. It's like he gets banged up, and maybe as the season goes away and they start to like lose games and just want to see what the future has, we could see more Kendre Miller. He's someone I'm definitely stashing. Now, I also want to talk about some messy backfields here, as we usually do for our 9th takeaway. First up, the Bengals. Chase Brown received 3 of 5 backfield opportunities inside the red zone. He outtouched Zach Moss again 16-9, finishing with 14.3 weighted opportunities. The receiving usage is encouraging, but this remains too close of a committee for Brown to be a league winner, and I agree. In terms of snaps, it was pretty much 50-50, with, of course, Brown getting utilized more in terms of touches, but Zach Moss is definitely the preferred guy in terms of, like, not screwing up and doing pass protection and doing the dirty work, so it's not enough volume for Chase Brown to get there, but he's still like a fine fringe RB2 type of guy. Then we have the 49ers and Cowboys, right? 2 weird things tonight. First, I had to take zeros, like FFPC, right? Their waivers only roll on like Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. So I had Rico Dowdle ready to go, and then the way that like just some of the games worked is I just didn't have a replacement for him, even in the flex. So that's brutal, right? Because like Giants and Steelers there's not a ton of fantasy options there. That they're just going to be sitting on your bench. So, with Dallas, Rico Dowdle's gone. Dalvin Cook makes his debut. Dalvin Cook gives you 7 touches, 11 touches for Zeke, a bunch of snaps for Hunter Lepke, the fullback. Just brutal stuff. Then, we have the Niners. Jordan Mason's now done. In shallow leagues, he's borderline droppable because you're going to have McCaffrey back here soon. Garendo might have done so well that he isn't going to give that job back. And Jordan Mason needs to take some weeks off as someone that just keeps on coming back. He has they're going into a bye week this week. So this is actually a huge piece of information. They're going to a bye. They're expecting McCaffrey to be back in week 10. So yeah, if you have to drop Mason, you absolutely can. Because I don't see a world where if McCaffrey goes down, that it's a clear split for Mason after Garendo looked pretty good yesterday, right? 14 carries, 85 yards, and a touchdown. Also 3 catches, 17 yards through the air. He could have had probably 2 touchdowns, but he slid late. If he could have really put the 4-3 Jets on and beat the guy to the corner, I think he could have scored another touchdown on that last big run. So Garendo looks really good. If you have him in Dynasty, I'd feel very good about it. But again, they have a week 9 bye. Probably going to see McCaffrey's going to at least threaten to play in week 10, and then we'll kind of see how that goes moving forward. But Mason, just a massive downgrade for him rest of season. And again, the Dallas stuff, just pretty brutal. If Rico Dowdle is not good to go as a lead back, I don't know that you can start anybody there. Then after that, we have my Jets, which I will not spend too much time on. About to sneeze here, but this is just like insane usage. The last 2 weeks, we've had a monster usage for Breece Hall. You can see here. This is from the utilization report over at Fantasy Life. That UG score thing, right? You can see it's like with a star, right? UG score. That's called their usage score, right? 9.7, 9.4. Then went down to 6.9 in this game for no reason at all, right? Back-to-back 20-plus PPR point games. We were very excited, right? This is our 3-game sample with Todd Downing calling plays. And they come out in this game, and for no reason, right? Breece Hall is out here. Better success rate, better EPA per play, better straight-up yards per carry than Braylon Allen. And they get Braylon Allen how many touches? They give him 12 touches. 12 for 32 and a touchdown for Braylon Allen in this game. In a game that the Jets should have won. Breece Hall gives you 16 carries for 80 yards, 5 yards a clip. How you don't just keep, this is a game where Breece Hall should have had 20 to 25 carries. It makes no sense why he didn't. But I will say the good news, right? When we talk about this for fantasy, the good news is that they lost this game in hilarious fashion. So I don't know that anything that happened in this game is going to stick moving forward. This was completely out of the blue. They completely switched everything here, right? Breece Hall went from a 9+ usage score to a 6.9. He goes from 80% plus of the snaps down to 74%. He goes from 80% plus of the rush attempts down to 57%. He goes from 75% plus of the routes down to 59%. It's just across the board, short down and distance snaps, right? That's short yardage, third and short, third and goal, whatever. Goes from 50% to 29%. He loses an inside the 5 attempt. It's just, I don't understand taking the ball out of one of your best players' hands in favor of Braylon Allen. It's just, a year that will never end, and it's just absolute brutal stuff from the Jets here. It's just an incompetent team doing incompetent things. Again, it just sucks because I have to sort of face the music for fantasy purposes here when Breece Hall has had monster usage the last 2 weeks, looked like a great fantasy pick, and now just because of the incompetence of my favorite team, one of my most drafted players is now suffering, and probably one of your guys' most drafted players. So that sucks, but the good news is I just don't know that this sticks moving forward because, again, it was a shit show. Now, after that, we have the Patriots. For whatever reason, the Patriots put Ramondre in the doghouse because of the fumbles, and just in time for the Jets game, 79% of the snaps here from the utilization report, 74% of the rush attempts, right? 79% of the snaps, most since week 1, 74% of the rush attempts, most since week 1, 56% of the routes, most since week 2, 10% of the targets, about fine. So he got a lot more carries, he got a lot more snaps, a lot more usage than he has since, week 1 and 2. So now he's back into that role as a firm, fringe top 15 option, which is a massive, massive upgrade for Ramondre. He had 23 touches in this game, I believe 2 touchdowns as well. The game sealer on 4th and short just to stick the knife in. Then we have Washington here. People are still waiting for Brian Robinson to rebound after the injuries early. I will say, right, so we have the splits here. 58% of the snaps for Eckler. 46% for Brian Robinson. It is a late trailing game script where they were, of course, it wasn't trailing. They were up 12-7 for a while, but it was this game script where they had to keep on passing and trying to make something happen in terms of hurry up offense. And of course, the last drive, they have to do that as well, just because then the Bears ended up being ahead. Yeah, they got the 7 from 12-7, went for 2 for the Southern, was 15-12. So it was a weird game script where they were playing a lot of hurry up and passing down stuff late, which kind of phased Brian Robinson out of the game. I think there will be better days ahead where we can see Brian Robinson against the Giants next week, probably looking pretty good. The only concern here is that Brian Robinson's getting phased out of the receiving game completely. He had 11 targets through 4 weeks early in the season. He's now only had 1 target since week 5. So I don't know how much the injury is doing that. I don't know how much Austin Eckler actually looking good at football is doing that. But something to definitely monitor, where he went from a stone cold top 15 fringe option to now being more on the fringes of RB2 status. We'll see if things get better. It was his highest snap share and touch count since week 4. So I think things are trending up, but there might be a cap on the ceiling of kind of what he can get touch-wise in this offense next to Austin Eckler, who is actually, again, playing pretty good ball right now. Then our 10th takeaway is just talking about the Thursday night game. The Rams come out here. They bring out Puka. And I thought that JJ just summarized this very well in terms of just the stuff that stood out to him. Kupp and Puka returned to action. You had Kupp's 9 targets to Puka's 8. Both of them did well. Both of them got home. And this was a game to save their season in terms of you had reports that Stafford was on the trade block. Kupp was on the trade block. They win this game. They're 3-4. The NFC West is shaky, right? Where the Seahawks lose, the Niners win, but then they're on bye and then probably have to play the Rams either once or twice rest of season. So the Rams are now back in the mix here with actual playoff aspirations, meaning that Kupp and Puka will be staying, and they're both going to flirt with top 12 numbers moving forward. Puka looked amazing off of injury, where he had a 41% targets per out run and just looked explosive, and then Kupp was the safety valve option, PPR type of guy. Both guys should be good to go moving forward. Kyron Williams looked good. And then also the thing to note is the second to last thing here from JJ. Aaron Jones saw 100% of Minnesota's running back rushes against the Rams. I don't know why that was. I mean, I know why. Aaron Jones is better than Ty Chandler, but you don't want to. That feels extreme. Maybe it was in a game where they felt they just needed to use it and like just try and win the game and try and claw back. But that's a huge development if that sticks in any capacity, because before this, it was like Aaron Jones, very efficient, very good on like 60% of the snaps. If he gets to 100, he's not going to get to 100%, but if he gets like 80% plus, then we're talking about like a top 6 running back rest of season. And then also Jordan Addison, I don't really have much to say, but he only has one game with at least 20% target share. He was bad again this week. He is somebody that is now much less of a trustworthy flex option is what I'll say. He's now more of this boom bust. You're praying, because it seems like outside of Jefferson, it's kind of spread thin. And then we also do have TJ Hawkinson coming back very, very soon here. So just some things to note when it comes to that Vikings offense. But that's going to do it for us today. As always, again, it is the Sports Equinox. Get in on the fun over Underdog Fantasy. They have Boosttober going on, boosts every single day. Probably a bunch of promos going on today for the Equinox. Check it all out. There should be fun things to go check out in the Pick'em lobby, in the draft lobby, all of that good stuff. But if you can't support there, just leave a like, subscribe, and I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh, oh.